Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Beverly Hills View. Our guest is photographer Matthew Rolston, who works and lives in Beverly Hills. We're so happy to have a professional like him representing our city. We'll talk to him about his filmmaking and videos, his photography for publications, and his creative direction for branding and concept design. Matthew was born and raised in Los Angeles, studied at Chouinard Art Institute, Otis College of Art and Design, and has an honorary doctorate from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. He has 2 prestigious dealers who have shown his work in museums and institutions around the world. Many of his photographs have remained in those institutions and in those collections, like the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., and our own LA County Museum of Art. I met Matthew when I was West Coast editor of Andy Warhol's Interview, and he was one of our dependable creative photographers. And I say dependable because most of the photographers couldn't meet a deadline. So we were so happy that Matthew was photographing for us. And besides Interview, he was published in Vogue, Vanity Fair, GQ, Harper's Bazaar, and on and on and on, and Rolling Stone. And actually, Rolling Stone and Rolston enjoy one of the longest collaborations, somewhat like the connection that he had with Oprah. So among all of the publications, he's had more than 100 covers, which is like a photographer's dream. So we can talk about his award-winning music videos too, his print and TV campaigns, and all the international brands that he shot for, like Revlon and Campari, Pantene, and also 3 of the shops we have in Beverly Hills: Gap, Burberry, and Polo Ralph Lauren. But let's start with our friendship. Our friendship, Matthew, it goes so far back.
I've known you, Joan, since before I was born. I'm just saying.
I think so. I think it's like this whole thing. But you said you were discovered by Andy Warhol. What is that story?
Well, my brother was in New York and was
Dean,
who had an art gallery at the time. So my older brother. He's no longer living, unfortunately. And he was friendly with the Warhol Circle, just on a social level. And so I got to meet people at the magazine when I would go to New York and visit my brother and sleep on the floor or on the couch or whatever, struggling artist. And I came back to LA. I was still a student at Art Center at the time. And another photographer was working for the magazine and had a kind of falling out over the cropping of an image.
At Interview.
At Interview.
Someone was working.
And so that photographer turned down the next assignment. And a friend of mine at Art Center, another student, had worked with that photographer as a stylist, called me up and said, oh, well, there's this assignment for a magazine called Interview. And I knew what it was, of course. And he said, you need to go over and meet the West Coast editor right now. And she said, you need to go over and meet the West Coast editor right now and show them some of your work, and maybe it'll be a project for you. So I did, and I went and saw several people. I saw Susan Pyle, who was one of the editors.
She was here, and Peter Lester was here then.
And Terry Tariba, and then I met Joan. And my very first assignment and my very first published picture was a portrait of Steven Spielberg right around the time of Jaws. Well, he was an important young up-and-coming director, but he wasn't the superstar that we know him today.
But that's the thing when I say dependable, which is what I talked about in the beginning, because here's somebody turning down an assignment, right? Mm-hmm. And here you are, it made an opening for you. And then how did you continue to get assignments after that?
Well, the magazine liked what I did, although I'd never actually met the people at the magazine. I met Andy socially before at events in New York, but...
when you were going back and forth?
Back and forth, but they liked it. I mean, literally mailed the pictures and published it, and another assignment. It just kind of built up. And after about a year, I think I'd probably done 5 or 6 assignments, and I was on a visit to New York, and I went and met the staff at the magazine, and slowly but surely, my relationship with the magazine grew until I did quite a bit of work.
Yeah, so you were getting a lot of assignments at that time from New York.
All of my assignments were from New York. From New York. At that time, Los Angeles didn't really have a viable photographic community. It's hard to imagine, but LA, if you think of the Woody Allen movies, like in Annie Hall, he said, something like, I wouldn't want to go to a city where the only cultural advantage is that you can take a right turn on a red.
Right.
So LA was very much looked down upon. There was really no media other than films that was coming out of here that had any impact. So we were sort of the first group of photographers to revive a West Coast influence.
The thing that I thought was interesting is when you said you had to mail the photographs, because that's what we did back and forth. We were mailing things.
Yes.
Now, when you're on assignment, how do you send your things?
Well, everything is digital, and
That's
a lot of my clients leave a session with a hard drive with the images like right then and there.
And that's it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, right after you finished?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes I've been asked to email images during the shoot.
Is that right?
Yeah, so it's everything's a
total,
lot faster now.
It's a different world. I'm going to get back to interview because you did a lot of work for them, and we had no budget. We had very little budget, and that is something that I think people who are starting in the art world have to know, that they start with nothing and show that you built up something with it.
It isn't really any different today. Young photographers still work for free for magazines in order to get their name out there, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. A magazine is a great launching pad for talent. Your name's on it, it's a showcase. But that is true. Interview not only didn't have money, they didn't have a staff. They really were a sort of ad hoc organization.
I know, but it was
of
so
friends.
great.
It was really great. And it was, most importantly, an incredible venue for portraiture and celebrity photography. We're so suffused with that now. But you have to think back in the late 70s, early 80s, there really were, other than the big magazines like Vogue and Bazaar, there really wasn't anything else. Celebrity culture hadn't arrived yet.
No, and we have a Jodie Foster cover that you did, which was way ahead of what was going on. And here you say that portraiture was the mainstay of interview.
Absolutely.
Which now it's like everyone wants it, right?
Well, we live in a celebrity.
There's the Jodie Foster.
Yes, well, we live in a celebrity-saturated culture, and this was sort of, in a way, the beginning of that. And the person responsible for that, of course, is not me, it's Andy Warhol, and his interest in celebrity, his interest in fame and kitsch and many other things. And I mean, you have to think that Andy was somebody that, as a child, was writing away for autographed photographs of Shirley Temple and such. He was obsessed throughout his life with stardom.
With movie stars, right.
Movie stars and the glamour of Hollywood.
And Isabella Rossellini was one of your covers?
Isabella, yes, that was one of the later covers. One of the early covers was Michael Jackson.
Oh, I'm going to talk about Michael Jackson
Yeah.
in the end. I didn't realize that you had done that.
And it was because of Andy that I met Michael. Actually, the way my career started was that my first break was to work for Interview Magazine and for Andy. From that, I got to meet Michael Jackson, who became a client. Because of those works, I was noticed by Joan Quinn, and I started to work for Rolling Stone.
So that's when you became so close to Jan.
Yes, and also then I got a call from Harper's Bazaar because they needed somebody on the West Coast to do small things.
So Nancy Dinsmore was at Harper's at the time,
Nancy
but
Dinsmore
everything
was the
came
West
from
Coast
New
editor.
York.
It all came from New York, and by the way, all those things I just mentioned happened while I was still a student
Is that right?
at Art Center.
So you're so young still.
Well, then I quit school and just started working.
And then the Cyndi Lauper one I want to show too, because I'm going to ask you about the styling of these covers. You started styling your own work at one point, right?
Well, not Cyndi Lauper.
Oh,
I had
there's
help.
Cyndi Lauper,
Yeah,
right.
I had help for that, but earlier, before that, there were no stylists. In fact, you know, we live in a world now where the celebrity stylist is a thing. That didn't exist. Yes, there were stylists, but they were called editors, and they worked for magazines. Stars didn't have their own personal stylist. They didn't have. There's now a thing that I call the glamour industrial complex. That didn't exist in 1979. And certainly there was no major fashion editor at Interview Magazine that was going to fly out to the West Coast with clothes.
They weren't. But did the stylist, I'm talking about the photography stylist, didn't you have someone that, didn't we have someone who would come and style the photograph, just say we want it on this location or that location?
As far as I know, it really was a category that didn't exist.
I see.
And I just had to do it myself. So I can remember going to, for example, a store that doesn't exist anymore called Charles Gallet, which was the most beautiful gallery of high fashion.
On Camden, right?
It was on Camden,
yes.
in the same building as my dad's office, actually.
Oh, was he? Yeah,
yes.
it's a great, it was a great building. right across from Mr. Chow.
That's right.
It's still there.
It's still there. Actually, this is a really funny thing, but this is a funny, where Mr. Chow is now was where there was the only McDonald's in Beverly Hills ever. There's no fast food in Beverly Hills. I don't know if that's a law or a rule or a zoning thing, but there was a McDonald's, and I used to go there in like junior high to wait to go up to my dad's office if he was busy to talk to him. It's all interrelated.
This is so great. Mr. Chubb from a McDonald's? No, I did not know that.
And Charles Gallet was in the space where Tiffany and Company had been before they moved to Wilshire Boulevard.
Right, that's right. And I remember when Zondra Rhodes first came here, she was showing at Gallet, and Gallet took the clothes on one side of Camden, walked the models across to Mr. Chow, and did the fashion show inside.
That's amazing.
I know, it was great.
So I think probably because of you, Joan, I got a chance to meet Charles and borrow clothes from him. It was all interrelated.
That's part of your styling situation,
yeah,
right?
Or if I needed jewels, I always really wanted to work with fine materials. I wanted to work with beautiful clothes, and not costume jewelry unless it was very elaborate, but actually the real thing. I was just very particular about that, and I remember calling somebody at the magazine in New York and saying, I need jewels, and who better to speak to you about that than Joan Quinn, who has a well-documented interest in that subject, as I do, and I'm sure, Joan, it must have been you that made the introduction. So this is a funny thing. I would go to Tiffany and walk out with $100,000 worth of jewels, which back then was a lot more than it is now.
Right.
And they would put the jewels, this was the security, they'd put them in a brown paper sack and say, just take them, no one will know.
I know, and the manager was so great. We had a really good relationship with Tiffany's and still do.
And Lakin also, Lakin and Steve,
yes,
lent me many things
at
for
Magnans.
shoots.
He was at Magnans, and he was also a wonderful jewelry person.
Yes.
Kazanjian now has kind of taken over that part and loans a lot for shoots.
If you go to one of my shoots now and we have jewels, it is now, as I said, the Glamour Industrial Complex. There will be tables full of diamonds and such, and each one will be for a different jewelry company or vendor. There'll be a security guard for each one and an attendant for each one. It's a major thing. But when I started doing it, it was just a brown paper sack full of diamonds.
And I think that's so great to know, because that's how trusting everybody was. I mean, they trusted you, they trusted us, they didn't know us.
The world was smaller.
Exactly. So you're talking about styling and doing shoots. Were those on location, those shoots for interview? Were they in?
It varied. Sometimes they were in the studio. Sometimes they were sometimes in the studio. Sometimes on location. Just depended what it was. You were asking about the Cyndi Lauper picture. That was I eventually needed help, and I asked a couple of friends of mine, a duo named Raymond and Randy, who were
Raymond Lee
and Randy Palmer, who were well-known dandies about town and style experts, personally. And I asked them to begin styling my photographs, and I think they are the prototypical photographic stylists. There were a few other photographers that came up through Interview and Rolling Stone of my generation here in Los Angeles. Herb Ritz was one, Greg Gorman another,
Paul Jasmine,
who was an illustrator that became a photographer, and Farouz Zahedi. These are all friends of mine. And we all began sort of at the same time and eventually figured out that we needed to have people help us do the styling, and eventually drafted our friends, or I think we may have invented the category of celebrity stylist without knowing it.
Let's talk about those photographers. Bruce Weber, Bob King, was it Bob?
Bill King?
Bill King. Were you all in competition, or were you all friends? Because you were you were trying to get shoots at the same publications, I would imagine.
Well, I guess we were competitors, but remember Bill King and Bruce Weber were on the East Coast. They're New Yorkers, so I don't.
But they did covers too.
Yeah, I don't think I got to know Bruce over the years. I never met Bill, but I think that if there was a sense of competition, it was really who was going to get to the editor and suggest a story first and say, "I got dibs. I got dibs on that one."
But you were all friendly. It was a friendly group.
Absolutely.
Somewhat like the artists, right?
I'm still friendly with those photographers, very much so.
Because I know
Herb Ritz is no longer living, but Herb was a great friend.
But during that time, the artists in Venice were all very friendly too. Then there was no competition between them. They would talk about sculpture and painting and whatever.
I always felt that each of us had our own approach, and it really wasn't competitive.
That's an interesting part, because I was going to ask you how you make a photograph your own.
Oh, well, that's just a question of personality, isn't it? One's interests. But I think it's interesting to note that things were sort of ad hoc, and I could call the magazine and say, I just went to a show and saw this person perform, or I just heard about this thing, and we should do something on it. If you do, I'd like to do that.
Oh, that
so
way.
we were almost
I see.
contributing to the editorial content, not just taking the pictures.
Yeah, I see, I see. So we were talking about being in the studio or being on location. I have a great picture that I'm going to show you right now that was on location, and it was for an interview shoot, and it was the Quinn twins.
Was that in your living room?
No, that was at Lloyd Ziff's.
At Lloyd Ziff's house?
Yeah, remember that?
I
And
don't
you did
remember
these
it.
great pictures on the inside of interview. I think they were called Inner Girls or Inner, what were they called? Inner People?
I can't remember.
Anyway, so you did this great shot, and those are the Quinn twins, all made up.
By Richard Shura,
Right.
who was one of the greatest makeup artists of all time.
Yeah, so that's a little surprise photo for you.
Thank you.
So we talked about all the photographers that you knew, and we talked about the support that you actually gave each other. Now, what about the covers of the magazines? You had Aguilera and Depp and Angelina Jolie, who went to Beverly Hills schools. Did you have any kind of connection with her on that level that you knew where she was?
No, I don't think I ever had that kind of conversation with Angelina. But those
That's
pictures,
a great picture.
those images were shot for a variety of magazines. That was a Rolling Stone assignment. You know, Angelina is a dream subject for a photographer.
I bet.
It's
Look at it.
hard to find anybody more gorgeous or more fascinating as a person, as a personality in front of the camera. But if I had any sort of connection, I remember that Michael Jackson was in my homeroom in high school, but he only appeared once because after that, you know, he was homeschooled, I think, and busy being a star. And then many years later, I got to meet him through Andy. Yeah.
This is so great. That picture. And then the Johnny Depp cover, which is like, looked so great. What was that for?
It was
That
for Rolling Stone. These are all, it's interesting, all these photographs for magazines are connected always to the promotion of something, a film or a new song or a new album. And
That's the way they get their editorial, right? And then they connect it.
Right.
Also,
I'm looking for a conceptual connection to that, whatever it might be. In the case of Christina's image, she had just done a song and an album called Candyman, and it was a riff on the Andrews Sisters. And it was a retro feeling, and I happen to love old Hollywood, and I've done a lot of things that have referenced the past in terms of styling and lighting, and she wanted that retro 40s look, but updated in a kind of modern fetish edge to it.
Yes, that was really great. You made 40 or 80 or 100 or 20 covers of Oprah. How did you make her different each time and more beautiful?
Oprah's a fabulous subject, and she knows exactly what to do in front of the camera. She's like a top model. It's unbelievable. She knows how, she can flick her hair and the end of her hem at the same moment, like a Beyonce.
And you go like that, right?
It's fabulous. She's really just got the special magic touch. I don't remember how it started, but the magazine called. I had done quite a lot for Hearst by that point, a lot of Harper's Bazaar covers. And at the time, Hearst owned Oprah's magazine. And they called, and they knew that my covers sold more than other covers for whatever reason. Maybe there was just a feeling of connection or warmth in my photography or glamour, I don't know. And so I got a chance to work with her, and we hit it off, and that just led to another. And it turns out that I have done more covers of Oprah with Oprah than any other photographer they've worked with.
Well, that's what I thought. And the idea of having the same subject and doing it over and over and over is very challenging, it seems to me.
Not to me.
Not to you.
No, I'm always,
You know,
I got lots of ideas.
Well, the ones we're talking about, we've been talking about all these celebrities who were established, and you have like some kind of connection to them because you know what their identity is. But someone like a Taylor Swift, who is young and hip, and you have to be young and hip to understand it. How do you keep up with that?
Well, the first way to find a creative solution to any creative problem is research. You can't make a comment on something if you don't know anything about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is look into what that person is about creatively, other images if I can find of them, what other people have done with them, and then I'll formulate my own response, which might be to go in line with that and project further, or maybe to go exactly against the grain and show a surprising, contrary point of view.
And do you have that connection with the young artists that you would have with a more established artist, celebrity?
I don't think in terms of age. I really just am interested in creative people, and particularly interested in beautiful, fascinating, and attractive people. But it's not a question of age to me at all.
So we've gotten our photography, we've gotten our publications, but what photographers look for is established campaigns, ad campaigns. And I mentioned before, you've done campaigns for Burberry and for Polo and for Gap, which are all in our Beverly Hills area, and for international. I mean, they're international, but as well as like a Campari or a Bacardi, that Pantene, that would start somewhere else. How do you get those kind of assignments?
Well, the way it used to work, I'm not sure if it's the same anymore, was that you were published editorially in a magazine. Your name is on it. As I said, it's a showcase. And people in the advertising community would see that photography. If they liked it, they'd look at the name, and you'd get a call.
Do you lose your creative integrity? Do they tell you what to do?
There's an inverse ratio. The more money that's involved, the less creativity is required.
And how do you handle that?
As graciously as possible.
I thought so. You have something that you call, instead of B-roll, you call it R-roll for Rolston roll instead of B-roll. What does that mean?
Well, B-roll is just a term used in the industry to refer to the documentary and behind-the-scenes shots or elements that you shoot that are of secondary importance. What's happened now with the advent of social media is that people are as interested in the making of as the of.
Oh, exactly.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
Because it's more relatable, and you get to see sort of behind the curtain what's going on. So all of my clients were asking for that kind of content, and very often on my sets there'd be some not very talented group of filmmakers doing a documentary about my shoot. And I looked at those films, and they were just dead boring, and who wanted to look at that? And at the same time, I was mentoring a new generation of photographers and directors out of Art Center. So I put them to work, and I had them make a behind-the-scenes film of one of my shoots for me, and I showed that to my client, and they said, "This is so much better than." I mean, people will want to watch this. It's entertaining. Right. Can your kid do that for us? And I said, "Yes, he can. Let me figure that out."
So we called it R-roll?
So I called it, it's a joke on B-roll. If Matthew Rolston...
There it is, that's great.
If Matthew Rolston could oversee and produce your B-roll, it would be called R-roll.
That's great. Was that just for videos, or was that for still productions too?
For any productions.
For any
yes,
productions.
Everybody needs to leverage their media in other ways, and telling the story of how it was made in an offhand and engaging way is something that's very important now.
Because you've been at the helm of all these award-winning videos, like Madonna, Janet Jackson, Beyonce, Marilyn Manson. That's what do you do that R-roll behind these too?
Well, I rarely direct music videos anymore. I've kind of left that behind. I feel that that has the cultural importance of that has come and gone with the shift in our culture.
Oh, you do?
I do in many ways. Not that I don't see great videos, but think about it. When I was at the height of doing videos, they were actually showing videos on MTV.
That's right.
And,
you were, I see, right.
It was regular programming. It was all videos all the time. There was a show called TRL, Total Request Live. There was a countdown show of the week's top videos every Saturday. And kids would come home from school to watch the debut of a new video, or they would stay home on Saturday and watch TRL. And there was an information block in the lower right corner in MTV. Just like in a magazine, they credited the director.
Oh, which was great, though.
It was fabulous, and people in advertising would see that, and again, you'd get a call for a commercial campaign. That doesn't exist anymore. Now, if you see a video, it's either on YouTube or the artist's own website or a fan site. It doesn't identify the name of the director, and so that cultural engine is just shifted and changed.
And I think it's really important to give credit to the artist who's created something like that.
I think so too. In fact, MTV Awards used to award Director of the Year and Best Video as part of the program, and now they don't. Yeah. Now they don't show that. They give that award, but it's not broadcast.
But I can see that. And we're going to take a break right now, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this book that I have up in the bookcase back here, and the Redbury Hotel project, and we have a lot to talk about. So we'll be right back with Matthew Rolston.
The same tree? No. coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
You make me wear my bike helmet. Taught me never to run with scissors. And to follow the swimming rules.
You tell me to stay away from drugs.
To always buckle my seatbelt.
So why do you keep a loaded gun in your drawer?
How safe is that?
You asked them to follow some safety rules. Now they're asking you. In fact, they're counting on you. Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. Remember, always lock it up. Visit ncpc.org.
Congrats on paying off all those student loans.
Finally, right?
I'm kind of living paycheck to paycheck right now.
Well, have you tried saving?
Bill collectors, they're the worst. Am I right?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Welcome back to the Beverly Hills View. I'm Joan Quinn, and I'm here with our guest, photographer, creative director, Matthew Rolston. We talked about photography and filmmaking and the challenges and all of the appendages that go along with your career choice of that time, but you're branching out, and you've branched out into this creative director project, I guess, or title that covers so much. And I think one of the first projects was the Redberry. Was it the first project, the Redberry Hotel?
It was. It was my first creative direction project was the Redberry Hotel for a Los Angeles-based developer named Sam Nazarian, who I believe lives in Beverly Hills as well.
He does. His whole family lives here, and we love the Nazarian family.
The Nazarian families are wonderful benefactors to our city, and our philanthropy is incredible. And Sam is a man who owns a great many hotels and restaurants, and he came to me interested in my ability to light, because lighting is a real specialty of mine.
Oh, that's interesting. Lighting for a hotel, which people don't know how to do.
Well, people understand that I know the secrets of lighting and how to make people look really gorgeous.
Which is what George Hurrell knew how to do.
He certainly did.
Yes.
And I learned a lot from actually meeting him, but also from looking and studying his work.
Isn't that true?
And as I branched out into commercial directing, I had to transfer what I knew about lighting in the photographic studio to a 360 environment where people moved around. That meant the lighting had to be built into the sets. It had to become architectural.
So it had to start from the very beginning. You couldn't just come in and put these lights up like this.
Well, you could do that, but you also had to build some of it into the set design itself. And so I developed a lot of techniques about lighting, and Sam was aware of that, and he was aware of my music videos. And so he asked me to consult on one of his hotels where there were a lot of complaints about the lighting. And what could I do to augment or change that lighting? And I looked through the hotel in question, and I met with the operations people and really looked through the property carefully before meeting with Sam. And I discovered that just wasn't really possible without taking the place apart. So I went and met with Sam, and he heard from him what he wanted, and I said, well, this is what I've discovered, and you don't have enough amps here, and there's no space there, and you basically light a lot of candles and give your guests a flashlight when they check in.
But that's just how it felt at one of his hotels, that the hallways were so dark that you couldn't even see your room number.
So anyway, that was a kind of a slightly humorous way of turning the job down.
But still, get a flashlight. It was so on my mind that you said that.
So lo and behold, about a week later, Sam called back and said, okay, I understand about that project, but I have something else I'd like you to do. And he just dreamed up this idea that I should be the creative director of a new hotel brand. He didn't have a name for it. He had bought a property that was failing from another developer and wanted to turn it into a hotel within 6 months. Had no concept at all, other than he knew he wanted it to appeal to creative people, to people in my industry, to people in photography, advertising, fashion, filmmaking, and thought that I would be a good conduit towards that. So I did it very quickly, and lo and behold, it was one of the most successful things I've ever been involved with. It got more publicity than anything I'd ever done to that time. I mean, you could take the most amazing magazine cover, you can do a groundbreaking music video, and no one's really going to write about it. But touch a hotel, It's a subject matter that is very dear to American consumers and magazine publishers.
Right, travel. It
just speaks to-
includes so much, doesn't it?
And it was really great because it's almost the same experience. I take a very holistic approach to my job. I'm not just a photographer that shows up and takes the picture. I design the picture. It's a setup.
That's what we're talking
I design
about,
the sets. I obviously with a team of people. The costumes, the makeup, the lighting, the atmosphere, everything. It's a real 360 visioning process. And I was able to bring that to hospitality, and it just fit me like a glove.
So that was Redberry, which was such a great success that it is now sold to another fantastic person, Paul.
Yeah, well, what's gone on now is that the company has grown, and Sam and SPE are more in the business of licensing their concepts and operating them than building them and owning them, which is very typical for the larger hotel hospitality brands. So now there is an extension. There's a Redberry in South Beach. There's a Redberry that just opened in New York that I worked on as well. And then we invented a restaurant brand within the Redberry called Clio.
Oh, that was the big thing.
And Clio has now spun off into an independent brand of its own, and now there's a freestanding Clio restaurant in LA Live. There is one now in the Miami Redberry. There's one in the SLS Las Vegas, and some of the other upcoming projects of the SPE brand will include Clios in other places and countries.
So I'm talking to you about this hospitality brand creation. So you did the colors, you did the logo, scent. You didn't talk about scent.
But I did everything. I named it.
So,
the naming, the uniforms, the colors.
Yes, that's what I'm talking
about. The
about.
materials, the scent, of course. It's a
Scent,
360
tell us
experience.
about scent, because that was an interesting concept in hotel.
Well, that's been around for a while. I didn't invent the idea of a branded scent in a hotel environment, but I did invent this scent. The concept for the Redberry was based on a kind of hippie townhouse. Okay? So if you think Haight-Ashbury, well, I originally wanted to call it the Ashbury.
Oh, that's
and
a great
there already is an Ashbury.
Oh, that's
and the
right.
building, they painted the building red, so it was sort of red plus Ashbury equals Redberry.
That's how we got it?
Yes. So so building that out, that feeling into fragrance, well, I feel that hotels are sexy places of romance and intrigue. And I wanted to encourage that because I'm extremely pro-romance and anti-violence. Although if you're a consulting adult, combining those things can be interesting, but I'm digressing.
Hello, Ted.
Anyway, but so I wanted to invent a fragrance that was unisex, that would appeal.
So you actually invented the scent.
I did.
Oh yeah.
I did, and
I see.
and I wanted to base it on the ethos of that hippie era. So certain things came to mind. For example, incense, tea, lemon, honey.
Right.
And those combined into a fragrance.
Comforting, comforting, sexy.
Yeah. What would you encounter if you woke up in the morning and had breakfast in a hippie townhouse? It would be maybe tea
honey.
and tea and patchouli
Right.
and burned wood, incense,
Right.
and that whole feeling. So those elements came together. We work with a fragrance company.
And then where does the scent come? Does it spray through the room?
It's throughout the property in different ways. In the public areas. There are scent diffusers. They spray it out on a timed basis.
But very, very subtle.
Yes, and never in the restaurant because that would interfere with the food smells, which is not going to be helpful. In the guest rooms, it's the amenities, the soap, the lotion, shampoo.
Oh, you use the same scent for those.
Yes, it becomes a signature of the property.
I see. I'm glad I brought that up because also you talked about the wardrobes for the staff. You have to work with the designer to do that, right?
Well, instead of working with a costume designer or a wardrobe department for one of my music videos or television commercials, I'm working with a uniform company. But it's exactly the same process. Being a creative director means bringing ideas to the table, bringing visual reference, organizing colors, having a concept and a framework behind that, and then working with the team to realize it.
So, the Redberry Hotel, the creative director, we've got them. We're going to have them all over the United States and in Europe, but one of the things that I don't want to leave out is this book, Talking Heads. Let's get to that. That Talking Heads, the Vent Haven Portraits. What does that mean?
I got to, throughout my career, I had many people say, oh, we love your editorial work, your work for magazines, and it's just fabulous, but what's your personal work? And I'd say, well, this is it. It's pretty personal, But I didn't really have the need to express something that was truly personal. I was still working as an assignment photographer and reacting to notes and suggestions from my clients.
Right.
I wasn't really purely self-determined, and I got to a point in my life where I needed to do that. I needed to do something without anyone's interference of any kind, just do what I want to do for my own reasons.
This to me was like an art project.
It was.
Like an art, yeah,
It
because
is.
you showed it in an art gallery, you took the photographs, you made a book. It was an art project.
I decided to begin a fine art practice without any particular goal in mind other than satisfying my own interest and curiosity. I didn't care if anybody saw it. I didn't care if it was published or if it was sold. This was by me, for me, as a way to learn and just develop my own aesthetics. And slowly, the book did get published. It has been shown in galleries, and now there are 2 other projects on the drawing board. So I've begun a fine art practice, and I would say that in a way my career has just grown a little bit like a plant or a tree. I have never really made a left turn. It just keeps developing and flowering out and becoming more complex. But now I'm still a photographer and a director, but I'm also a creative director and a fine artist.
So with this fine art, it was a museum that you found, right?
Yes.
Did you go to the museum and you
well,
were taken by what was there?
I'm the kind of person that when I have the need to solve a creative problem, my antenna goes up and I start receiving immediately. Things
Right.
just come synchronously to me. It's a blessing. And I was searching for a personal project, and I was reading the New York Times, which I read every day. And a man named Edward Rothstein, who used to write for the paper, a wonderful journalist, whose beat was obscure and small museums.
They don't do that anymore, but that was a fabulous thing that Rothstein did.
It was. And so he wrote an article that was in Thursday Styles. I can remember it was below the fold on the front page. And there was an image of the dummies at the Van Haven Museum, a picture he took, a snapshot. And I was completely drawn to it and fascinated by it. I love faces. That's really the main interest of mine. And this was the best group of faces I think I've ever seen. So what is that? And I went to the internet and I looked at the museum's website and I became fascinated with it and I contacted them. It was a long process. I went to Kentucky 3 times to visit the place on appointment, to meet the people, to form an agreement with them for permission to shoot there. Then that happened. We did the shoot. Eventually I found a publisher, published a book. Now they're in exhibition and now they're touring, and they've been shown in Germany last year, and they'll probably be shown in Russia later this year.
But tell us what they are. They're heads, but how are they made, and what are they? How are they displayed?
Well, they're a rare collection of ventriloquism dummies. They're called ventriloquial figures. They are different from puppets or marionettes because they're not operated by strings.
Yeah.
They're operated from within the
Inside.
There's a mechanism in each one. They come from different countries and different periods. You know, I'm working instinctively, but then afterwards I can analyze what my impulses were. That's opposite of my professional practice.
So you just went for it.
I just knew I had a burning
Right,
desire to do that. After I produced the work and I looked at it, I thought, my God, I've really internalized Andy Warhol here. Because Warhol's interest in kitsch.
Right.
Warhol collected Howdy Doody. There's a famous picture of Howdy Doody, a Polaroid that's in the
and
Warhol
he had
Museum.
the cookie jars, Howdy Doody
course.
cookie jars.
And also, Warhol, in the era that I interacted with him, was producing large format, extremely colorful portraits of celebrities and other famous people that were huge monumental heads, very often with the top of the head cut off, the shoulders cut off, very confrontive, and they were on a huge scale. What did I produce? Huge scale, very colorful frontal photographs of faces with the heads and shoulders cut off, on a scale similar to Warhol, bright colors, and the subject matter kitsch, American kitsch. This was not a plan. This is something internalized in me that I discovered afterwards.
An influence, the
Absolutely.
talking heads. Were they all made by different people?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Now we've got to get to the new book project, which is called Hollywood Royale. So before we leave, let's talk about that. Hollywood Royale, out of the School of Los Angeles? What does that mean?
Well, in that early period of working for Warhol and Rolling Stone, for Jan Wenner, I became very interested in the revival of Hollywood glamour. And the School of Los Angeles is a term of art that refers to the diaspora, the distribution of influence of Hollywood imagery, Hollywood glamour. this is a huge contribution that our city has made culturally to the world. I would put 30s glamour right up there against Chanel and the great couturiers of France as far as being an equivalent style influence. Adrian's costumes for Joan Crawford or Schiaparelli's dresses in Paris in the 30s are part of a style continuum of high style and kind of a bit of a decadent and sexualized style that has always interested me. This is a long story about why that happened and how I grew up in Los Angeles. But anyway, I became interested in recreating Hollywood. And I probably was the first person in my generation to do that.
And I think Donnell Dadigan, who is the creator of the Hollywood Museum that's in the old Max Factor building, felt the same way about Hollywood and old Hollywood, because that collection goes back to what you're talking about. And they exhibit things so often in the same vein. Well, how did you decide what to include in Hollywood Royale?
Well, Hollywood Royale will be it's in the planning stages now. It'll be a large-scale retrospective of my work from the 80s. It covers from 1977 until 1991, which is basically the 80s.
Oh, right.
It's a book that'll have 200 or 300 pages. There'll be an exhibition to support it. And it traces my own history, and there are some essays in it that talk about how Hollywood glamour became revived by my generation, largely because of Andy Warhol.
And where do you find the material, and how do you get it approved to put in your book? Is there material of your own?
This is only my photography.
This is only yours?
This is a retrospective of my work, so it comes out of my archives and files,
so it's
all of which I own.
I see, I see.
Yes.
So it'll all be, say, who was it? Madonna as Medusa, or something like that?
Madonna as Marlene Dietrich.
Or Marlene Dietrich.
Which is from 1985, or the Cyndi Lauper image with the chandelier headdress, or Michael Jackson wearing golden crests. And I kind of brought back this idea of old Hollywood in a modern and somewhat ironic way.
Yeah, that's a whole different way of looking at it, of looking at Hollywood, because it's all Matthew Rolston.
Well, it's influenced by
which is great.
The town I grew up in, the things that I loved.
Right.
And that E on the end, the reason it's Hollywood Royale instead of Hollywood Royal, is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke. This is meant to be taken with some irony and humor.
This is a major project, and we're really looking forward to it. I think you have great publishers who are like vying for it, and I wish we could be a part of it somehow. Maybe we will be. But before...
You know, Joan, you are a part of it already, organically, because we work together on some of those stories.
Oh, that's
You're
great.
part of the story.
Okay, yay, yay, yay. You talked about Michael Jackson in the beginning. One of the last photo shoots was of Michael's photo shoots was made by you.
I'm actually the photographer of record of the last sitting of Michael Jackson's career. I am the last person to photograph Michael Jackson in a formal setting. After that, he would still live for a few more years, but he was photographed only by the paparazzi or his own documentary crews. He never posed again after that session that I did with him.
And you did photograph him for the interview cover we talked about earlier, right?
I had a very long relationship with Michael, but it was really just at the very beginning of his career and at the very end. I wasn't around during the middle.
That's interesting.
And it was because of Andy. And I can remember that when I met Michael, I actually put some of my own clothes on him for the shoot. I was wearing a cardigan cashmere sweater from Carroll & Company in Beverly Hills.
Which we love.
And I'd gone to Carroll and bought some embroidered crests and crowns and things. I had the dry cleaner, so I kind of patched them onto my sweater. And Michael thought that was very attractive. He wanted to wear that. And I posed him behind a huge gold-gilded console and kind of reviving the feeling of old Hollywood. Well, sure enough, within a year or two of our relationship, he asked me to photograph him in the full regalia of a king. And we went to Paramount Studios and we got costumes and built a set and photographed Michael as the King of Pop. And this image was an important image because it was the first time that Michael had really codified that image of the King of Pop literally in a photograph. This is many years before Elizabeth Taylor verbally called him the King of Pop
and
on television.
Also, Andy did a photograph of the Shah all dressed the same way that you dressed Michael in his regalia, right?
And Andy also did a series in the 80s, same period, called Reigning Queens.
Right, exactly.
Which is also in its own right an ironic and funny title, Reigning Queens. It's Reigning Queens. And so there's no question that my creative output is inextricably linked to the influence of Warhol.
I think that's so great. Well, Matthew, I want to thank you so much for being with us today because I've learned so much. I've known you for so long, but I've learned so much. And on a very happy note, I have a portrait that Matthew Rolston did of me, and I'm going to share it with Beverly Hills View. There it is. Tell us about it.
I love that picture. I really
I
do.
love that picture too. It's in my living room.
You know, Joan, and actually there's another photograph or depiction of Joan in the background by Paul Jasmine, which is, I think, the most gorgeous picture I've ever seen of you, Joan.
But you set it up like that so that you would have this whole group around me. Well, it was something that I will cherish forever. And thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for you, Joan.
Thanks for watching the Beverly Hills View today. See you next time.